Today, we're diving into one of the most famous Greek myths of all time, the story of Icarus. You probably heard it, but it's more than just a simple story. It's a powerful case study, really, about ambition, about genius, and that razor-thin line between flying high and falling hard. At its core, the myth asks a really gripping question. When you're completely trapped and every obvious path is blocked, what do? I mean, how do you escape something that feels, well, inescapable?
For our two main characters, a father and his son, the answer wasn't going to be easy. It would take a spark of absolute genius, a whole lot of courage, and funnily enough, some wax and feathers.
So, let's start with part 1, an inescapable prison. Our story begins in probably the most legendary prison of the ancient world, the Labyrinth, on the island of Crete. It was this perfect, unsolvable maze. And the crazy part is, it was designed by the very guy who is now trapped inside it, the great inventor Daedalus.
And to really get this story, you have to understand Daedalus. He was a master artisan, a brilliant craftsman who could literally build anything he could imagine. That incredible skill is what got him into this mess, but, it was also his only hope of getting out.
So what were they after? It's a simple word, but it felt totally impossible. They wanted liberty. They didn't just want to get out of the maze. They wanted true freedom from the tyrant king who was holding them prisoner. Which brings us to part 2, an ingenious escape plan. Daedalus, faced with this impossible problem, puts his inventor's mind to work. He comes up with a solution that's literally forged from feathers and wax. And the plan he came up with was truly ingenious. Clever, totally original, and just wildly inventive. He watched the birds, right? The only creatures that could come and go from the island whenever they wanted. And it hits him. They can't escape by land. They can't escape by sea. They have to go up. They have to fly. So he does it. He builds these two magnificent pairs of wings. But as he's fitting them onto his son, Icarus, he gives him this incredibly important and, as it turns out, fateful warning. The very tool that will give them freedom, it comes with a strict set of rules. The instructions were all about finding a delicate balance, a real knife's edge. If you fly too low, the mist from the sea is going to make the wings damp and heavy, and you'll fall. But if you fly too high, the heat from the sun will melt the wax holding the feathers together, and you'll fall. Survival meant staying right there in the middle path.
Okay, part 3. The ecstasy of flight. And at first, it works. It actually works perfectly. They leap from their prison, they catch the wind, and they are soaring. Can you imagine that moment? Pure success. The sheer joy of freedom after being trapped for so long.
For Icarus, the feeling was just pure exhilaration. I mean, just think about it for a second. The wind is literally under your wings. The whole world is shrinking below you. It's this incredible rush of excitement and power that he's never felt before in his life.
But as he climbed higher, that feeling of freedom starts to twist into something else. The power of the ascent. It starts to feel like he's not just a man anymore. It feels like he has the power of a god. He wasn't just escaping. He felt like he was conquering the sky itself.
And right here, this is where the story takes its tragic turn. Part 4, the tragedy of hubris. The joy of being daring gives way to the terrible price of being reckless. He completely forgets his father's warning. He forgets about the delicate balance he needs to stay alive. All he feels is that power, that pull of the sun, and so he starts to soar, higher and higher and higher still. This brings us to a word that is absolutely central to so many Greek tragedies, hubris. And it's not just regular pride. It's a dangerous, excessive arrogance that makes you feel like you're invincible. It's that fatal belief that the roles, well, they just don't apply to you. And hubris? It almost always leads to recklessness. Icarus gets drunk on the feeling of flight, and he becomes careless. He just throws all caution to the wind, ignoring the life-or-death warning from the very man who gave him the gift of flight.
The result is immediate, and it's devastating. The sun's heat melts the wax, just as his father said it would. The feathers just scatter into the wind. And as Icarus plummets down into the sea,
All his father can do is scream out in agony, watching his son's own foolishness, his folly, cost him everything.
So now we get to the lesson, part 5, the wings enduring lesson. The escape plan worked, but the journey itself was a complete tragedy. So what's the wisdom we're supposed to find in all that wreckage?
Well, Daedalus, he makes it to safety. He got the liberty he wanted, but he's a broken man. He's left with this terrible anguish, this gut-wrenching pain and sorrow, knowing he's free, but his son is gone.
The central lesson of the whole myth is really about the virtue of moderation. The flight itself was a test of avoiding extremes, right? Don't go too low, don't go too high. Icarus failed that test because he gave into the temptation of too high and completely ignored that balanced, middle path that led to survival.
The story is also about championing prudence, which is really just about being careful and showing good judgment. Why did Daedalus survive? Because he respected the limits of his own invention. That simple caution is what separated the father's freedom from the son's tragic fall.
When you put it all together, you see that this story isn't really telling us not to be ambitious. I mean, Daedalus's dream of escape was amazing and necessary. Instead, it's teaching us that real freedom, real success, it requires more than just a brilliant idea. It requires balance.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough question for our own lives, doesn't it? We live in a world that is constantly telling us to dream bigger, to push the limits, to reach for the sun. But this ancient story is always there, forcing us to ask, where do we draw the line between soaring with ambition and falling from hubris? Thanks for watching.